right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Wow, where did the first 2 weeks of October go? We have a jam-packed month, as per usual, with a big selection of space exploration events because it's World Space Week this month, and we'd love to connect, of course, with astronauts. Who doesn't love astronauts who leave our planet and explore via the space station, even as far as the moon? But we also really like to feature the scientists and the engineers who make these journeys possible and also push the boundaries of exploration, sending probes and robots out into our solar system and beyond, looking at our galaxy, looking at our universe. And of course, they turn that lens back on our planet as well, so we can understand our Earth better and how it's changing. And two people who know a lot about our planet and how it's changing are our friends from Hearts in the Ice, the team of Hilde and Sunniva, two seasoned polar ambassadors and citizen scientists. Hearts in the Ice was created in 2018 as a global platform for education and social engagement, connecting students, scientists, manufacturers, environmental organizations, and really all who care about the health of our planet, bringing them into a big conversation around climate change and ways we can all be part of the solution. So Exploring by Seat of Your Pants classrooms are very familiar with our live events with Hilde and Sunniva. We were with them through September 2019 to May 2021, when they spent a total of 19 months living in a remote trapper's cabin in Bumsabu in Svalbard, isolated and 140 kilometers from their closest neighbor, taking part in an incredible series of citizen science projects for organizations all around the world. Today, we're chasing them to another location in the north of our planet. They are at the Arctic Circle Assembly in Iceland. It's the largest network of international dialogue and cooperation on the future of the Arctic and our planet. So let's bring the two of them in live with us right now. Hey, Hilde, hey, Sunniva, how are we doing?
Hey, Joe.
Hi.
It's always good to see you.
Yeah, we're doing great, thanks.
Excellent, excellent. I've got a little deja vu going because it's about a year ago we connected from Iceland in the same, probably the same conference, the same building. So it's great to see you back in action and, you know, meeting with youth, meeting with other important stakeholders and sharing your message and what you've learned.
Yeah, and let's hope that a year later there's some action happening here, which
Absolutely.
we'll talk about.
Yeah. All right, Hilde, we'll let you get us started.
Yes, thank you, Joe. And thanks for, it's not more than a couple of weeks ago, we were in Cambridge Bay speaking to Joe, and we had also back then we had some great speakers with us from the Indigenous people, and we had such a good time up there meeting the locals and the Indigenous people and just listening to what they had to say. And now when we are back in Reykjavik to the Arctic Circle Assembly, that feels important. Last year we were speakers here, and this year we are more here to listen and to connect with people and just be sort of immersed of this community that are so engaged around the climate change and around the Arctic, what's happening above the Arctic Circle. So this year I think we have more than 2,000 people here. It's a record this year.
It's a record.
And the feeling I have so far is that there are more young people, more Indigenous people involved, and there are more call to action, really, like they actually say less blah, 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 and more actions. So it feels purposeful to be here, and it's I think it's going to be a few great weeks, a few great days, and hopefully we will see some real action after this.
Because if we're staying here for a few weeks, we need to change our tickets.
That's true. We're traveling all the time, but yes.
We're a little all over the place these days.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just want to share, if you can tee up the photo of the amazing youth on the panel, that's from this morning. And I'm sharing this picture for a couple of reasons. One is this session was hosted by Students on Ice, and we know forget his name now. Jeff, thank you. See, it's too much travel. Jeff Green, who founded Students on Ice, and the special guest, one of the two special guests that was going to join us, is second from the left there, Alianai. And unfortunately for us, and fortunately for her, the Canadian delegation is actually sitting in a dinner with Mary Simon, the Governor General of Canada, right around now. So it's been really interesting for us. We sort of have divided and conquered, because some of the sessions, we want to go to some sessions that are scheduled at the same time. And it's more important now, like this year, than ever before, just to have the key stakeholders sitting in conversation with one another, not just to talk, but to actually see how they can collaborate. Because sometimes the question is, do we need more data, to understand that we're in trouble here on our planet? So it is really refreshing to have such a strong representation of youth. And I'm going to ask Joe, you to tee up that short little video of Mary Simon from this morning, because all of us in Canada know that she is, and I'll just read this very quickly. She was sworn in on July 26, 2021, as Canada's first Indigenous Governor General. And she's the 30th Governor General since the Confederation. And it was a huge honor to have her there today, and including the Prime Minister of Greenland. So this is the first time they've had two senior officials from Indigenous populations.
And even the Norwegian Crown Prince was
That's
there.
right. And they're all sharing the same stage. So I'll just tee this up just to show the breadth and depth of who's here today. Sorry, there's no sound there. I guess Is there no sound, Joe?
Good afternoon. Bonjour. Ulukut unusakut tungasubitsi. Damani liame hobiasukuma.
You're giving me the
Chairperson Grimson, Prime Minister of Iceland, President of Estonia, Crown Prince of Norway, Prime Minister of Greenland, and all the other distinguished guests and Indigenous leaders, youth and guests. I've had a wonderful welcome in Reykjavik, and I am very pleased and delighted.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that little piece, because that was the opening session today. And there's we're going to have a full day tomorrow, which is Friday, and then also Saturday. And we're really looking forward to it, because, we don't have the answers to very much in terms of problems that need to be solved, but we're two people who are absolutely dedicated and committed to aligning with other leaders out there who are doing great things. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Joe, so you can introduce a most special guest that we have with us today, that we were really fortunate to have with us last year. So I'm gonna move so she can sit right here.
Excellent. Well, we've got Aluna joining us, born and raised in Nuuk, Greenland, and has always been very close to nature. So since 2019, she started doing climate activism and has made some climate marches, participating in many media projects to spread the message. She's a Students on Ice alumni and has worked on many projects in the field of climate activism, biodiversity, and plastic pollution. So Luna, so great to have you joining us again.
Yeah, thank you. I popped in a little last year, also at the Arctic Assembly. So it's great to be here again this year.
Excellent. Well, I think the best place to start, you are at the Arctic Circle Assembly. You are in Iceland. What are you doing? What are you getting up to while you're there?
So I was invited by the West Nordic Council. And the West Nordic Council is basically Greenland, the Faroe Islands, and Iceland. And I'm going to talk on the behalf of the youth from Greenland and say what our perspective on the West Nordic Council is and how we can collaborate in many perspectives, like the education, but also like the possibilities and barriers that we meet as Greenlandic youth. And then as well, I'm so lucky to also be a part of another panel with Global Choices. I am an Arctic angel, and we're going to talk about a 10-year protection moratorium in the Arctic.
All right, that's awesome. So, you are young, and there's many youth who tune into these live events and are maybe a little bit intimidated about, are they old enough to make a difference, to have their voice heard? I wonder if you've ever felt kind of, nervous in that situation or doubted any doubts and what you do in those situations.
As late as yesterday, I was kind of nervous because I was with a bunch of people that were very fancy and had suit and ties, and they seemed very, very important, and they talked about important stuff. But as I began to talk with them, I quickly realized they're just people, but also that they talk about things that matters to me and that I think important. And I think looking at events like this, like conferences and opportunities, not as something as policymaking and very important stuff, but more as like conversation and engaging people and trying to meet a common ground. And often young people very much have the knowledge because it's from their hometown, it's from their home places. So the knowledge you have is very meaningful, and in policies is just put a bunch of fancy words on top of it. But there's a lot of knowledge that you can contribute with, and you showing up there will help them a lot actually to represent the youth. And it's important to represent the youth because it's our future, but it's also our present day.
Right, absolutely. And you mentioned that youth, oftentimes youth from the Arctic, they are seeing these changes firsthand. So they have the knowledge to speak on them and what they're seeing in their community. So I wonder, what changes have you seen in Greenland since you were born there? What changes have you seen or heard about?
So in Greenland, our nature is very unique. We live in the Arctic and we're very close to the nature. When you live in Greenland, you are very dependent on the nature there is there. It determines kind of your everyday life. And I've seen extreme weather changes where the seasons kind of change. So maybe the summer will be so hot. And actually last Christmas in Greenland, there was no snow on December. And it only came very much later. So just seeing things like that, where you see the weather is changing and the way the animals are behaving are changing, is very, very clear. And there's so much in Greenland that depends on the nature, and we're very linked with the nature. So it's clear to see when you live in the consequences of climate change in many, many aspects. Also, just as a young student, you see when you go to school, the weather is very changed.
Absolutely. And, just a few weeks ago, we connected with Hilde and Sunniva in Cambridge Bay, and George, an amazing Inuit elder, joined us and told us about the changes he's seen in his lifetime. And when he mentioned that some days in the summer can get as high as 30 degrees Celsius, that just floored me, because that's not normal. The temperature should not be getting that high in these Arctic regions.
Mm-hmm. And you see it in the ice melting, and it just affects so many things.
Yeah. So we mentioned in your intro that you're a student on ICE alumni. So there could be some high school students tuning in who don't know about Students on ICE and the amazing opportunity. So can you tell us a little bit about your experiences with Students on ICE?
Yes, I'm a Students on ICE alumni, and basically I did an expedition in 2019. So in the summer, we went with a bunch of different youth from all around the world on a ship for 3 weeks, and together with experts and musicians and just scientists from all around the world as well, we traveled through the Arctic and got to learn about climate change, about Indigenous knowledge. So it was basically just a bunch of youth and experts brought together to learn from each other and to learn from the nature that we were seeing. So instead of just talking about the Arctic, and saying, oh, the ice is melting. We actually were there and saw everything that was happening. And it's an opportunity that you should definitely seek up and definitely try to see, because you can get so many good memories from traveling with students on ice and meet so many amazing people.
Absolutely. You need to be able to see what's happening, because that can totally change your perspective. And look, I mean, you can just see how it's influenced you. And, you've been speaking and traveling and working so hard to shine a spotlight on this.
Yes, and Joe, maybe we should ask her too. She is part of Global Choices, and she's called Arctic Angel. Maybe you can tell us a little bit what that is.
Yes. So I'm Arctic Angel, the very cute name. And it's an intergenerational group. So that means people from 8 years old and much older that work together to protect the poles. And the poles are basically the North Pole and the South Pole and just the ice. We want to protect the ice. And it's not just people from the Arctic that protects it, because when the ice melts in the Arctic, it also affects people from all around the world. So therefore, we also have Arctic Angels from all around the world that help to protect the poles. And we have a 10-year protection moratorium, as I mentioned earlier, where we want to protect the Arctic in that way. Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect.
One of the session this afternoon that we were sitting in was hosted by Students on Ice, and the topic was engaging youth in Arctic policy. And I found it really interesting to hear the perspective from the youth on what the barriers to entry are around engaging the youth in Arctic policy. And one of them referred to Section 66, which said there should be youth inclusion and funding at every single level of policy implementation. And I just want to ask you how, like, if you were to suggest or mandate that something should happen in terms of engaging youth, how would that happen? What would you say to a business leader, for example, or somebody running a foundation or a company?
So I would say that it's important to include youth, and that will mean taking a youth with you, have a youth represented, having their voices heard, but also acknowledging that maybe the language they're speaking is not always translating to a youth. They don't always have the experience yet. They have other kind of experience that is useful. So changing the way you're speaking, because a lot of youth has a lot of knowledge about their field, and it's not translated to this like policy making conversation type of way. So involving a youth, helping a youth to get to these spaces, because not everyone has the opportunities.
Yeah.
So helping them, funding them,
Like mentor, mentee.
yes, exactly. Having a mentor, and then not just to have a youth there, but also to ask them what's your opinion and how did that feel for you, kind of like showing them the way on how to do these type of conversations.
I think that is so key. And I'm not sure who it was this morning who also mentioned just how they're struggling. That youth today in some of these remote Arctic communities are just in survival mode, just trying to take care of basic needs like food on the table, access to proper internet and resources. And when we don't level the playing field there in terms of shared resources, then you're at a deficit, so to speak.
Yeah.
So all the more reason to really empower youth.
Yeah.
Right.
Acknowledge that not everyone has the accessibility to the internet. Not everyone has the accessibility to be at that place at that time, but kind of like making it a common ground.
Yeah.
And try to find ways that you make it accessible and that you help the youth in that way.
You mentioned a second ago, Joe, about George when we were in Cambridge Bay, and it was really interesting. We asked him what he felt was needed in Cambridge Bay, and without hesitation, he shared how sad it was for him that the youth in Cambridge Bay were not learning his ways. like how to live off the land, how to survive, how to make tools from nothing without going shopping and buying a ready-made something or other. And so just the sharing of knowledge and, taking away this unconscious bias around ageism, and that the elders are actually the wisdom keepers and the youth are the wisdom seekers, and how important it would be to bridge that gap. And so we could learn a lot from that in our Western world.
Yeah, I learned something too this morning from that session, that obviously not all the Indigenous people and the communities has the same background, or they have different languages, they have different needs. So just do more asking, go in there and ask and listen. I think that is important. And the key message today was bring a youth for leaders all over the world. Just be a mentor and bring a young person with you.
One question I had, and this could even go back to you, Joe, because you've been hosting so many calls over the last however many years, right? Is you're broadcasting people from remote regions all across the planet, and we have you here now as a representative from Greenland, and we had our amazing experience at Bumsaboo, which we were in full immersion with the natural world. But for most people, they're living in a really switched on world with all the modern comforts. And so the question I have, and I'm going to keep asking this question just sort of internally and do more listening in the next few days, is how do we as people who have had these really fortunate experiences to live so close with our natural world actually infuse others to care about the natural world in a way that we have had the privilege of experiencing firsthand without them traveling? Or do we need to travel and explore to do that? Maybe you have some thoughts about that, because we're at a conference and there's a lot of heady conversation going around here, but we need people to connect with the heart, as Global Choices does so well, and as Students on the Ice does so well with taking you on expeditions.
Yeah, there was one panel this morning actually talking about how we should acknowledge Indigenous knowledge and traditional knowledge, as well as you acknowledge like Western knowledge. So to the people that don't really have that access to be in the nature or to be around it or have experienced it, you can still understand the stories. You can understand other people's experiences as a form of knowledge. The traditional knowledge about, for example, Setna, which is ocean carrier,
goddess of the sea.
Goddess of the sea. That's the word.
Sedna.
Yeah, and that message there is to protect the oceans and to protect the nature and to not being pollutive. And that's just a story.
And that was way before plastic.
That was way before. Yeah.
Across.
So before the pollution we know is at today, that was also a way of telling you should protect the nature.
Yeah.
That's just a story, but it's just as important to acknowledge that kind of story as like the Western way of understanding like knowledge. So even though you're not directly in the nature in the Arctic, you can still understand these parts and acknowledge them as a true way of knowing.
Yeah, she also said something wise, that only take what you need and use everything. So it sort of was a circular economy and share.
It's like academic knowledge is just as important as life knowledge. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Joe, do you have anything to share on that question?
Well, I mean, us, we've always believed that, when students are armed with knowledge and understanding, they can think critically about the world around them. They can make decisions, and, usually they're motivated to act. And so what we've always found, is to bring people like yourselves from the front lines of science, exploration, adventure, and conservation right live into the classrooms of the students, because no one knows the stories better than they do, the places, the exciting career path. So, that's always been our thing. If we put, the leaders in these areas in front of classrooms, good things are going to happen. And it's not that teachers or textbooks aren't an important part of the classroom, but there's just that added excitement of being in the field and meeting somebody who, is tackling an issue head on. And that storytelling is always powerful.
And
Very
having
much.
that innate passion that you possess and that we possess and that you possess, Joe, right? So
Yeah.
hopefully we make some change out there.
Absolutely. Well, let's open the conversation more broadly, because I can see we've got a good little crew tuning in via YouTube right now. So if you have any questions for Luna or Hilde and Sunniva, now's the time to activate that chat sidebar and fire through some of those questions. While we wait to see if some questions do come in via the chat sidebar, Luna, I wanted to ask about this because I was reading a little bit about you earlier this morning, and I read that you're a traditional Greenlandic mask dancer. And I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
So, a traditional Greenlandic mask dancer sounds a bit different, maybe, than what you imagine. It's basically I paint up my face and I then dance. But there's so much meaning in those elements. It's a very boundary crossing dance. I show elements of love and scary things and the recognizing from our ancestors. And basically, traditional mask dance is something that was passed on. It was nearly gone, but then it was reinvented. And it's a way of showing people how to react. So I can do very many things. I can try to make you laugh. I can try to make you scared. I can try to make you wonder. But the most important thing is that you react. Because when you're out in nature and you meet a polar bear or you meet any kind of obstacle, you shouldn't just freeze. You should try to react. Whatever your reaction is, if you want to laugh, you want to scream, you should try to bring that forward. And I learned traditional mask dancing by my cousin. And it's just this way of having some knowledge passed down. And it's a beautiful way to show my culture. And even when I'm traveling all around the world, I can always do that dance and then I'll feel closer to home. But it has a lot of fun elements in it. And I hope one day you will get to see it.
Cool.
All right. That's awesome. Very cool. Okay. We got a question here in the chat. This is from Miss Higgins' crew in Erin, Ontario. And they're wondering, a place like Erin, Ontario, go further into the US as well, it's pretty far removed from the Arctic. So a common question is, what can we do? How can students help the Arctic heal? How can they, play a role?
I could take a stab, and then it's really a good question for you. I would suggest a very thing that came out of conversations this morning when the same question was asked in a slightly different way is, get involved in researching the Arctic and try to understand from a local perspective what's at stake, what's being lost in terms of language, culture, tradition, wildlife, ice. And then get involved in Arctic youth networks because there's this real need today, more than ever, for younger people to come into these youth networks. Right now, I think, I don't know how old you are. You don't have to tell anybody, but they're typically in their 20s or early 30s. And so they're looking to bring in even the younger generation. So there's no cap for that. But I would suggest some of the youth that might be listening from Ontario to reach out to maybe the Arctic Youth Network or even Students on Ice and send an email and say, I'd like to somehow get involved and help protect the Arctic. What can I do?
So, the Arctic is a big place. It's very unique. And something that's been said so many times today is that the Arctic is important because what's happening in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. When my ice melts, somewhere else in the world, the sea level is rising. And it's affecting islands. It's affecting so many places. So at these discussions today, you don't meet only people from the Arctic. You also meet people from Singapore and from so many other places, because the Arctic is relevant
Mm.
for the whole world,
Mm.
and the Arctic is huge, with a lot of diversity. But if you can get to know the Arctic, if you can try to help, that's what needed. Exactly what you said. If you can reach out, if you can try to understand, that will help.
It's also very important to understand that the pollution and the mass of carbon coming out in the atmosphere is not caused by the Arctic. It's not caused by the people living up in the Arctic. It's caused by all of us around the world, because we are one world and one globe. So I think it's important to, of course, get to know to understand what's happening in the Arctic, because it's super important for all of us, but also see what you can do back home, what you can make as a contribution back home. Maybe you stay in school, be a good student, and educate in whichever thing that really you are passionate about, and do that well, really well, and find new solutions for how to make food, or how to make transportation better, or whichever topic you love. Stay in that topic and do that really well. And in your everyday life, you can do some small things that are good for the planet, and that will also affect Iluna's area and where I live up in the Norwegian Arctic, because the pollution and the impact is not coming from the people living up in the Arctic. So that's important to understand and realize too.
Yeah, I think we, especially students and adults too, get stuck in that mind frame of, well, I'm only one person. What's the big deal about my actions? But if everybody feels the same way, well, nothing's going to happen. But millions of people choosing to make small changes in their life every day, that adds up pretty quickly. And I always like to think of the corporations. We think that they're all powerful, but if, as students get older, they're going to speak more and more with their wallets and the decisions they make. And you'd be amazed how quickly corporations can change if those wallets close off to them. So, sometimes just doing a little bit of research and choosing the products and the companies that you're going to be supporting as you get older can have a big impact.
That's right.
Absolutely. Be a thoughtful user. That's super important.
Okay. Another question here. Okay. This is a tough one. This is from Esther. We know ice is melting. We see it in the news. How can we stop that from happening? Is there going to be a period of time where, it's just going to keep happening, but, changes now are going to kind of have a bigger effect, 10 years down the line or something like that?
Yeah. You want to go first?
Well, just to take a stab, and it's because it's a loaded question. Thank you, Esther, wherever you are. It's a tough one because the jury is a little bit out on that. We have had the fortunate pleasure, and so have you, at these assemblies to listen to the scientists who've been studying the ice for decades, and it does not look good. So when you understand that, it's really easy to have great despair and sort of throw in the towel and say, I give up. There's nothing we can do. And then the other side of that coin is the fact that, we have no option to give up. We have to retain that element of hope, and we have to use the wisdom of, local traditional knowledge to understand what changes these remote communities have experienced, and take that into consideration when we're looking at also the scientific data to support the fact that the ice is melting. So I think that we don't have a full picture yet, which is why there's so much information right now that we're looking for to bring forward from the local communities that have been the most impacted and the least directly responsible for the ice. And then there's a lot at stake right now with the war in the Ukraine, and shipping opening up transit channels in the ice and breaking up the ice. So the ice and the session that you're going to be at on Saturday with Global Choices and the moratorium, things like that become increasingly more important because, if there's no sea ice, there's also no polar bears. And then, we start to go downhill from there. So I think it matters to keep asking that question, Esther. And then we'll keep listening and keep asking the question of others too who are studying it. And I'm sure you two have a different perspective on this. So
Yeah, no, it's a huge question, and I think just us keep inspiring people, engaging people, and sort of try to create a movement. I think we all are part of this. We're part of the problem, all of us, and we just, because Sunniva and I, we just love to be part of the solutions as well, like Iluna is. So just engage, talk about it, try to do something every day in order to mitigate the climate change impact. So the impact, it will. We saw this during COVID. We saw that the whole world could move in the same direction when we felt threatened. This is a much bigger threat. The climate change, the nature crisis, it's several crises that's going on now. So we really need to take actions. And we have belief, and we really have hope that people are starting to more and more. I mean, just in the last year, there has been more discussions around this. So, and we see more and more actions. So that gives us hope.
I once met a scientist that told me that we have the solution for all the climate change problems that we see now.
Yeah.
And we do. There's been done so many studies, so many decades worth of knowledge. And the way to change this, we have that knowledge and we just have to implement it. We have to change our way of life. We have to change the way we are living in this society today, because we have all the answers on how to stop the ice from melting this way, because it's not normal. It's affecting the whole world. And it's just to pushing yourself also how to live more sustainably, but also like the politicians and the governments, because they're the one in the power.
Yeah.
And if you can push that, then you can try to see changes, because we have all the answers. There's somewhere someone has a precise answer on how to stop the ice from melting, and it's like stopping global warming, and we know how to do it. We just have to do it, and that's the problem. We're not doing it yet.
Yeah, what we really need is this generation, is our youth to get into power. We need to push out some of those who are in power now, who are happy with status quo, and we need minds thinking about solutions and innovation and changes, and
and we need prime ministers like the one from Greenland who spoke today, who are standing in their own integrity with solid values to answer a question of how come it needs to be done on your terms, Prime Minister of Greenland. And he says, without mincing words, because it's got to be done our way. And what that means is they won't sell out their resources for the sake of mining uranium at the detriment of the local community. So it takes strong leadership to be really rooted in what they care about for the sake of your generation and the generation of your children, and on and on. So yes, Joe, young leaders,
and take courage. And it's all about the narrative too, isn't it, Joe? How we speak about climate change and how we speak about the changes we have to do. It's not, we should speak more about what the world could look like, and not everything that we have to stop doing, but everything we can start doing, which is a lot of beautiful stuff that we can start doing to make a better world around us.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great note to start wrapping things up on. I want to start out with actually, I should share some links. I want to share a few links here before we get too far. If you would like to dive a little bit more into what Hilde and Sunniva have been up to and will continue to be doing in the future, you can visit heartsintheice.com. We have another live event coming up together. This time it'll be October 19th at 2:00 Eastern. And Hilde and Sunniva will be in Oslo, Norway. So I'm looking forward to that one. And we'll be announcing, is it one guest who will join us?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. We'll announce that guest soon. And if you want to find where to register for that, you can head over here, exploringbytheseat.com/Hilde. So code for Hearts in the Ice.
Joe, can I quickly mention, sorry, is because this is kind of exciting. We've been moving around a bit too much, but it's all really good moving. in November, we're going to be up in Churchill and with Polar Bears International. We'll be broadcasting live from a tundra buggy with polar bears around. And then in January, we'll be broadcasting live from the Antarctica. So we're going to be keeping you busy, Joe.
All right. Some great events to look forward to. And again, if you visit this spot on the site, as soon as we're ready, we will have those events up there for your classrooms to register. And speaking of those classrooms, thank you so much for joining us virtually today and for those great questions. And Hilde and Sunniva and Aluna, it is always great to have strong voices with us. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you, Joe. Thank you so much.
You're the best. And thanks, everybody,
thanks,
for joining.
everyone. Yeah, thanks.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your conference. Safe travels. And we will see you again next week. Thanks, Aluna.
We will.
Thank you.
Thank you.